Hello everyone, this is the Insider Threat Podcast, an ISO 3103 1980 compliant show where we explore issues with the human factor and its impact on security and business. I'm your host, Steve Higdon. In this episode, we cover culture and its impact on insider threat risk, updates on Imran Awan, and more. Don't touch that dial. Welcome back. This is episode 19 of the Insider Threat Podcast for the week of September 25th, 2017. This is an interesting week because the tempo at the Insider Threat Podcast household has picked up quite a bit in the past few days. No big deal, really. I've been left some pretty comprehensive checklists that I'm supposed to adhere to. As I've mentioned before, the short to tall person ratio here is greatly in favor of the little people. I don't think all of you have noticed this next thing, but some certainly have. I post a link to the newest episode on the Insider Threat Reddit page as soon as I finish uploading it. So you can actually listen a day or two early, in most cases, over the web. There's a little pro tip for you. Speaking of the Insider Threat Reddit group, you may have also noticed that I have a new call-in number for the show. You can use this to leave voicemails or text messages with suggestions, comments about the topics we discuss, questions about Insider Threat, or anything really. Who knows? I might even put your comments or questions on the show, unless you ask me not to, of course. So anyway, the phone number is 443-292-2287. I'll mention it again at the end of the episode, as well as include it in the show notes. It's time for your InfoSec question of the week, where Google is king and the prize is non-existent. The question last week was, in 1945, the first computer bug and debug were found and accomplished by operators of the Harvard Mark II computer. What did this bug consist of, and how was it documented in the maintenance log? The answer was, an actual bug. Yes, that's right. There was an actual bug in the system, and in the maintenance log, the technician taped the bug to the page and the term debug was born. Congratulations to Toby from Cincinnati, Lucas from Sells River, Zach from Houston, I hope you guys are doing okay down there, Zach, and Nathan from Washington State for getting the correct answer. Here's your question for this week. In 1889, Nintendo was founded by Fusajiro Yamauchi. The company went on to become a forerunner in video game console manufacturing. What did Nintendo first create? Send your response to infosecanswer@gmail.com. Be sure to include your first name, location, and the hashtag ACES&8s. Our news article this week comes from World Tribune and is titled, Imran Awan Hid Secret Server, Backed Up Democrats' Data on Dropbox. We spoke about this guy a few weeks ago, where he was working for the federal government as an IT technician for several years and was caught both stealing IT equipment and potentially stealing sensitive government data. At that time, the data part was primarily speculation. Well, it looks like that was the case. Imran Awan collected data and emails from many different Democratic Congress members, then stored everything on a private Dropbox account. It's estimated that he had data belonging to about 45 different members of Congress, amounting to terabits, that's in quotes, according to a senior House official. And don't go jumping out of your seat. This wasn't my wording. I know that terabits would be the speed at which data moves, not the amount of it. So that's just a quick update on the case. It looks like everything they were afraid of ended up being true. So this is our final installment on a 4-part series on the pillars of insider threat protection, which includes technology, policy, training, and culture. If you're just tuning in, you should probably start with at least the first one, as it sets the groundwork for the series. On that note, it's a good idea to listen to the others as well. This week, we're talking about culture and its impact on insider threat risk. Security culture is the culmination of the other 3 pillars and represents the actual effectiveness of your organization's insider threat protection program. It consists of the technological investments that have been implemented in the operating environment. It uses policy to inform the users of what actions are and aren't allowed to take place on organizational assets, as well as fills in any holes that can't be filled with technology. Training is also used to communicate the rules of behavior and engage users in a more social setting. While some employees may choose not to read the policy, they'll still get the information from mandatory training. There are additional ways that security culture can be improved outside of those highlighted in the other pillars, however. Employees should feel comfortable and obligated to report suspected insider threat incidents. Management should try to encourage such reports and offer praise or reward for accomplishment. An email going out to the entire firm thanking an employee for their report can have lasting effects. Not only will that particular person feel appreciated for their efforts, but every other employee will see the importance of constant vigilance. Corporate newsletters can contain a section on information security, which includes warnings about current attack methods and techniques, reporting procedures, and examples of the other organizations in the same industry that were compromised. Bring the topic of information security into everyday business conversation. Managers at the lowest level can send out a daily or weekly question to their teams related to the discussion and grade their subordinates on both their participation and correctness. It doesn't matter if the coworkers get together and cheat or otherwise get their answers. The point is that they're talking or reading about information security. Finally, the success of the Insider Threat Protection Program can be measured and the results can be communicated for further improvement. The organization can measure the number of insider threat incidents, as well as the number of reports. The scoring method for this measurement will be unique to the organization, but shouldn't be dependent on the number of incidents, as those will remain in a constant state of flux. Through proper use of the 4 pillars of insider threat protection, its associated risk can be managed and reduced. So what did you think about the 4 pillars of insider threat protection? I'll be sure to publish the article somewhere soon and share that link with you guys so that you might be able to give it to others who could benefit from the information. The first article this week comes from Mike Chappell at FedTech Magazine and is titled 3 Tips for a Smooth Data Loss Prevention Rollout. I feel as though we aren't hearing the term data loss prevention quite as often as we did a year or 2 ago, but it's still lingering in some circles. In this article, they mention Edward Snowden and Reality Winner, while also saying that 85% of security professionals and managers in the federal space are more focused on insider threat than they were a year ago. If you're listening to this podcast, that sounds like great news. It also says that 86% of organizations surveyed say that they have a formal insider threat program, which is up from 55% 2 years ago. The author claims that the solution to insider threat risk is to deploy a data loss prevention tool, which we can argue about that later. But they must be deployed in a way that will ensure uptime to the production environment, efficiency, and effectiveness. Here are the 3 tips for implementing data loss prevention, quoted directly from the article. Number 1. Test DLP tools in a monitor-only mode first. DLP platforms offer features that allow for the real-time interception of emails and the ability to block file transfers. These actions are designed to obstruct rather than just report the loss of sensitive information. However, this technology can also disrupt normal business activity if it's deployed without testing. IT teams should resist the temptation to immediately deploy a DLP with blocking rules and, instead, run it for a short period in monitor-only mode. This provides the security team time to investigate traffic the system could block and gives the opportunity to fine-tune the system to avoid false alarms. Tip number 2. Make sure cloud services are covered by DLP solutions. Traditional DLP systems monitor outbound traffic on the network for sensitive information. This approach can avert many types of data loss, but it doesn't work well for cloud services. For example, if an agency is using cloud-based email or document storage, employees can disclose data with a few keystrokes inside the cloud service interface. That information never crosses the network and therefore is never accessible to a DLP system. Fortunately, many cloud service providers now offer DLP solutions, either as a feature of their existing product or as a third-party offering. These cloud-native solutions understand the service's security settings and can detect public document shares, filter cloud-based email, and take other defensive measures inside cloud services. Our third and final tip, label sensitive data appropriately to protect it. Agencies understand classification and labeling. However, DLP systems can detect sensitive information only when staff tell those applications the format in which the data appears. IT leaders should make sure the DLP system is configured to spot the patterns common to sensitive information in an agency. Right out of the box, DLP systems understand some elements related to potentially identifiable information, such as social security numbers, but agencies need to configure systems to recognize the patterns of the most valuable data they use internally. The next article comes from Nick Ismail at Information Age and is titled Insider Threat. Majority of security incidents come from the extended enterprise, not hacking groups. So this one started the same way many of them do, highlighting that breaches are associated with insider threat are on the rise, then giving statistics to support that claim. Then something occurred to me. What if attacks that use insider threat aren't actually on the rise? What if we're just getting better at either discovering these incidents or maybe even just better at disclosing them to the public? As we've seen, including with the last article, more and more organizations are starting to take insider threats seriously. They're paying more attention to the actions of their employees and the systems on their networks. With all that said, it would make sense that we're seeing more insider threat incidents, right? The author hit the nail on the head next, or at least I hope so. They said that more and more executive board agendas are starting to devote time to discuss information security, especially after the recent high-profile breaches. Many speculate that GDPR in the UK will even further highlight the need to care about security. They don't just blame users in this one though, they also say that you need to have a solid balance between culture, education, and technology, while understanding that the weak link might be in your third-party contractors or cloud services. The third article comes from James Evans at Onion ID and is titled, Is Your Organization at Risk from Insider Threats? This one starts by defining insider threat risk and underlining the differences between negligent and malicious insider threat actors. According to the article, negligent insiders are identified by the following. The employee who never bothers to read corporate security policies, so he has no idea that their current email practices are unsafe. The employee who has their corporate laptop stolen but doesn't report it for a week because they're on holiday. An employee who uses the same short passwords for their business accounts as they do for their personal accounts. The employee who frequently leaves their laptop logged on and unattended. The employee who talks about confidential business information in public settings. For malicious insiders, they give the following examples. The individual who steals intellectual property to sell to a competitor. The individual who leaks confidential customer information. The individual who commits fraud for personal gain. And the individual who steals their business laptop when they leave the company. I just want to highlight something that I thought was interesting. For the negligent employees, they actually addressed them as employees, but for malicious, they called them individuals. In my mind anyway, this was done to kind of separate ourselves from the ones who are maliciously doing these things, while reminding ourselves that the employees who negligently do bad things are still employees and they can be helped. Then they talk about ways to reduce your risk. The first one is to ensure security policies are easily understandable. I covered this in our second pillar of insider threat protection, where I made the comment that security policy doesn't just exist for the information security team, the executive management, or the legal department. It's actually supposed to be used to communicate the rules and restrictions to the employee base. Then they said to make security a part of your organization's culture. Isn't that convenient? That's what we covered this week. The next tip is performing ongoing risk management. We see this everywhere, especially when looking at organizations that have to adhere to compliance requirements. They make sure everything is good when audit time comes around, but then put security on the back burner for the rest of the year. In my opinion, an organization's approach to this has a big impact on their security culture. Finally, they say to use appropriate security software to track and analyze employee behavior. I think we've covered each of the 4 pillars now except training, which in my opinion is the only way to transform our users from being the biggest vulnerabilities to the first line of defense for our organizations. Our thought of the week comes from Brian Chesky, the co-founder and CEO of Airbnb. He said, "Culture is simply a shared way of doing something with a passion." Thank you for listening to episode 19 of the Insider Threat Podcast. Please remember to subscribe and review in your favorite podcast app, and also share with everyone you know. Those reviews are key to building this out and improving for later episodes, so please feel free to leave suggestions. You can contact me on Twitter @Steve Higdon or send an email to steve@theinsiderthreatpodcast.com. Join our Reddit community and discussions at the subreddit named Insider Threat. The subreddit is also where you'll find the show notes for this and any other episode, as well as links to the topics we've covered. If you go to our website, you can also find a link to the Patreon page, and you can subscribe to the newsletter to get up-to-date information on current episodes and news for the show. Call and leave a voicemail at 443-292-2287 to have a conversation, get a comment added to the show, or even ask a question. Thanks again, and I'll see you folks next time.